Corvin Laderberg sat on the riverbank restaurant's veranda, enjoying the scenery, feeling a sense of peace and tranquility. He felt as though he was in paradise, watching the beautiful sunset. The sun slowly fell beyond the horizon, flooding the sky with fiery colours. The river flowed calmly past him, and Corvin felt its current soothing him. The leaves of the trees rustled quietly around, and birds flitted from branch to branch before settling down for the night. Laderberg felt the warm breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. He looked around and noticed that the restaurant's veranda was filled with people who, like him, were enjoying this beautiful evening. However, several tables around him were still free despite the restaurant being quite crowded. Even the waiters approached the solitary diner near the water with caution, politely but with a hint of fear, offering him more drinks or to bring another dish. Laderberg merely smiled slightly, aware of the dozens of eyes drilling into the back of his head. Sometimes he deliberately adjusted his cloak to reveal the symbol of his authority, the inquisitorial rosette, for all those around to see. Corvin never hid his power and always acted openly, though he commanded extensive networks of agents, members of which sometimes didn't even suspect who truly stood behind them. But today, for the first time in a long while, the Inquisitor could breathe out. This dinner was not an attempt to track down a high-ranking cult leader or meet with a secret agent. It was just a dinner. Yet something important was indeed about to happen. Inquisitors of all stripes had been arriving at this planet from surrounding sectors over the course of the month to attend the conclave. Corvin expected to see many of his colleagues and friends, as well as some Inquisitors he had only heard of. Lighting a cigar, the Inquisitor reminisced about an old friend whom he was destined not to meet again. Solomon Locke could rightly be considered a veteran of the Ordo Xenos. In his youthful days, he had joined Lord Inquisitor Gruberman as an acolyte. Alongside him, Locke spent a long time on the ocean world Tyrama Secundus, where they battled the mysterious inhabitants of its dark abysses. After successfully concluding that operation, Solomon fought against many of humanity's vilest enemies, from the Aeldari Exodites on Tirathane to the Orc Empire of Charadon. One of Locke's most famous missions was the eradication of the Hrud on Chinchar. After some time, Locke was transferred from the front line in the Segmentum Obscurus to the Segmentum Tempestus, becoming part of the increasing Ordo Xenos forces aimed at halting the Tyrannid invasion. Although Locke was unfamiliar with this type of Xenos threat, during his service under Gruberman, he had listened to numerous lectures on the dangers associated with the Tyrannids. However, it was a mission related to the Tyranids that ultimately led to Solomon Locke's demise. He led a secret operation in the Amphelian system. The Inquisitor and his accompanying forces, consisting of the Elysian drop troops of the 99th Regiment, Company D, as well as some elements of the 226th Cadian Regiment, and the Red Scorpions operative forces under the command of Karab Cullen, landed on the moon Beta Amphelion 4. There, the Imperial Task Force discovered traces of experiments on Tyranids conducted by the Magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, the experiment ended in failure. For reasons unknown, the Tyranids managed to increase their numbers and destroy the containment mechanisms. They then slaughtered all the research personnel and vanished into the jungles. The Inquisitor and his accompanying forces encountered a vast swarm of Tyrannids, and after brief combat, the Astartes escorting Solomon Locke were ordered to retreat from the planet. Despite the fact that the Red Scorpion's cruiser could have taken aboard not only the Inquisitor but also the surviving soldiers, the drop troops did not bring anyone else with them. In addition, the transport requisitioned by Locke dismissed all his pleas for evacuation and also left the system, leaving Solomon and several dozen surviving guardsmen surrounded by Tyrannids. In the last battle, the Inquisitor managed to kill one of the Tyrannid Biotitans, but the numerical advantage was not in favor of the Imperial forces. Solomon Locke managed to transmit the materials of his investigation to the Ordo Xenos before he was overwhelmed by the wave of chitinous monsters. Although it is not known for certain what became of Inquisitor Solomon Locke, he is officially considered dead. Another equally renowned Inquisitor from Ordo Xenos is Hesycha Carmillus. Hesycha holds extremely puritanical views, and over 300 years of her service, she has led numerous worlds free of Xenos forces, as well as condemned and executed many rogue traders, admirals and lord commanders for affiliations with aliens. She is well known for her harsh and militant character, as well as her sharp intellect and insight. Those who have met Carmillus at least once describe her as a tall and slender woman, almost always clad in power armor that makes her resemble a sharp blade. Hezekiah is always surrounded by her acolytes, whom she personally recruited from dozens of different worlds. Her servants, like her, are lethal warriors and just as grim as their mistress. Even the transhuman assassins from the Death Watch do not intimidate Carmillus, and she will never tolerate insubordination, even from other Inquisitors. These traits made her the perfect emissary in the domains of the Death Watch, in which she spent 16 Terran years, leading the Tower of Brass in the Watch Fortress Erioch. She performed her duties selflessly and ruthlessly, exterminating the enemies of humanity throughout the Jericho Reach. Recently, Hezekiah has been devising a plan to destroy the warp gate known as the Jericho Maw, and despite the fact that the Achilles Crusade is in full swing in this region, Carmillus insists that the Imperial forces must have a plan to destroy these gates, in case the crusade does not go as planned. She believes that the gate represents a huge threat to the Imperium should Imperial control over it be lost. However, many are convinced that Hezekiah Carmillus has other hidden motives, which she keeps in the strictest confidence. Adriel Quist was one of the few whom Inquisitor Carmillus took notice of. Noticing her impressive psychic powers, Hezekiah admitted her into her retinue as an interrogator. When the Inquisitor headed to the Erioch fortress, Quist followed her, and after 5 years of service received the insignia and became a full-fledged Inquisitor. Despite this, she remained the right hand of Inquisitor Carmillus, and often carried out her orders. Adriel herself is very fascinated by Xenos technologies, but tries to hide this as she understands well that many may consider her a radical or a traitor, though she only wishes to see the Imperium surpass all other races of the galaxy in technological development. In connection with this, Quist secretly supplies multiple Xenos artifacts to a hidden community of tech priests, known as the Crucible. Adriel would also like to find warriors of the Death Watch who share her unbiased attitudes towards the path of humanity's development, for then the search and capture of alien technologies would be greatly facilitated. More than anything, Quist is interested in the technologies of the Ta'au, especially the research conducted in the Velkhan Sept. She has led several operations of the Death Watch in the Black Reef and beyond, acquiring many artifacts of interest to her and the priests of the cult Mechanicus. Nonetheless, Adriel, despite her fascinations, is keenly aware of her duty to the Emperor, and thanks to her efforts, many threats to the Achilles Crusade were timely discovered and neutralized. Being the main field agent, the Ordo Xenos in Erioch Fortress, Inquisitor Quist often spends time on her ship Angelus Invictus than aboard the fortress. Although the ship is relatively small, it fully meets the Inquisitor's needs. It has enough room to accommodate strike teams, as well as a small crew, the only living members of which are the pilot-navigator and Quist's personal assistant, an assassin of the Vindicara Temple, Neil Z. But when the Inquisitor is in the fortress, she resides in the brass tower alone, without servants or guards. Sometimes she stands in the audience hall watching through the panoramic window at the dim light of the cold rising star of the system. Another no less powerful and mysterious Inquisitor in the Jericho Reach is Verlaine Rameus. Despite the fact that little is known about this woman, she undoubtedly possesses nearly limitless authority and an unlimited mandate among the Brothers of the Death Watch. No one remembers how or when she arrived in the Jericho Reach, but most assume she came with the first wave of the Achilles Crusade, as few had seen her before the onset of hostilities. If one were to directly inquire about her service in the Jericho Reach, the stewards of the Fortress Erioch respond to the question with perplexity, while the senior members of the Death Watch recall a woman in a cloak, with a hood covering her face, resembling the Inquisitor Rameus. But no official records of her presence are remembered. Many veterans of the Watch suspect that she has always been in the Jericho Reach, but only started acting openly in the last few decades. Besides the insignia and seal of authentication, there are no official records of her powers, yet the Vigilance Chamber of Fortress Erioch has ratified the Inquisitor's powers and demanded no further confirmation of her identity. After affirming her authority, Verlaine assumed command over some of the death stations and gathered a retinue of 4 brothers of the Death Watch, who would become known as the Dead Cabal. Together with her trusted Astartes scattered throughout the Jericho Reach, the Inquisitor began to observe unusual phenomena and frightening incidents. Meanwhile, Rameus conducted a secret solitary investigation, several times providing fragmentary information on strange beings lurking in the Jericho Reach and demanding that the Death Watch take action against them. However, due to the secrecy and reluctance to fully disclose all the truth discovered by Verlaine, these demands and warnings were left unheeded. Abandoning attempts to reach the Death Watch's command, the Inquisitor became less and less present at the Watch's observation stations and almost ceased visiting Fortress Erioch. Nonetheless, despite her constant absence, the Inquisitor has the astonishing ability to appear where she is needed and to vanish just as quickly. Many have also noticed that Verlaine often finishes sentences for others and frequently reacts to others' actions as though she already knew they would happen. Some speculate that such behavior on the part of the Inquisitor is connected to her possessing psychic abilities, while others secretly debate Verlaine Remaeus's affiliation with the Ordo Chronos. Regardless, many agents of the Inquisition have begun to suspect that the mysterious Inquisitor knows far more about the Jericho Reach than anyone else, and some of the more paranoid members of the Ordo Xenos even accuse Verlaine of sabotaging and disrupting their operations. Among the Space Marines and Inquisitors serving at Fortress Erioch, more and more rumors about the enigmatic Remaeus have started to appear, each more outlandish than the last. Some believe the absence of any information regarding Verlaine stems from certain most high-ranking individuals in the Imperium, destroying any mention of her to conceal her possible involvement in a conspiracy or cover up the tracks of a failed operation. Others surmise that the Inquisitor is not who she claims to be, and that the Inquisitorial enclave in the Jericho Reach is too trusting of her. In truth, Verlaine Remaeus is a high-class operative of the Officio Assassinorum, sent into the Reach to infiltrate the ranks of the Inquisition and fulfill a certain task. Yet others believe that Remaeus has learned to change her body, Calidus Temple assassin style, and takes polymorphine to transform into anyone, thereby allowing her to appear so suddenly. However, Remaeus pays no heed to these rumors and does not attempt to dispel them, believing that those who spread them spend too much time on idle chatter instead of focusing on the myriad threats surrounding the Imperium. Many have noticed that Verlaine's activity has increased lately, and she has begun appearing here and there. The Inquisitor travels through the Jericho Reach in her usual manner, by unknown means, moving from one dead world to another so swiftly that she has attracted the attention of some Astartes from observation stations. Quite recently, Verlaine conducted several expeditions to the Dark Pattern, some of which ended in fierce skirmishes as the Inquisitor and her companions discovered something terrible in the depths of these worlds. However, the expeditions of other Inquisitors turned up nothing, as they found only dead rocks and barren wastelands. But Remaeus seems to know exactly what to look for, yet does not know where, and awaits a certain event that might clarify everything. She often discusses her findings with Night Warden Alric, and though the essence of their conversations remains unknown, evidently they discuss a discovery that could pose a threat not just to the Jericho Reach, but to the entire Imperium. Verlaine's meetings with the Knight have also aroused suspicions among some Inquisitors, who suspect that Remaeus and the Black Shield were acquainted long before Ulrich joined the Death Watch. Beyond the boundaries of the Jericho Reach, Lord Inquisitor Fidus Kryptman, one of the most famous members of the Ordo Xenos and one of the most ruthless, is a specialist in combating the Tyranid threat. Kryptman was the first Inquisitor to witness the devastating consequences of this Xenos species invasion. The remnants of the world Tyran, after the Hive Fleet Behemoth's invasion, profoundly changed Fidus, and he began a widespread extermination of all Tyranid organisms within reach. During the Hive Fleet Leviathan's invasion, the Inquisitor led Deathwatch kill teams in the Tarsis sector to aid the Mortifactors chapter and the Ultramarines in defending the world of Tarsis Ultra. Kryptman shared all his extensive knowledge about the Tyranids with the Imperial forces and assisted them in the battle as best he could. Ultimately, the Tyranids were halted, yet the threat emanating from the Hive Fleet Leviathan did not vanish. The Hive Fleet continued to ravage the Imperium, causing irreparable damage by destroying the Forge world of Griffon IV. The Inquisitor understood that he must, at all costs, slow the Leviathan's advance to buy time for gathering the Solar and Tempestus battle fleets. With grim determination, Kryptman ordered the establishment of a quarantine cordon and the use of any means necessary to destroy the Tyranids, the most effective of which proved to be the scorched earth tactic. Every world that came within reach of the Hive Fleet was evacuated and subjected to immediate exterminators. However, some worlds were impossible to evacuate, but the Inquisitor still issued orders for their immediate destruction. With a stroke of his pen, Fidus Kryptman inflicted such a brutal reprisal on the citizens of the Imperium, the likes of which had not been seen since the Horus Heresy. For such terrible actions, Kripman began to be called a radical and a traitor, not only by the high-ranking lords of the Imperium, but also by many members of the Inquisition. It was only when wandering orcs occupied dozens of devastated worlds across the sector that the Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos promptly issued the Edict of Carta Extremis against him, stripping Fidus of his title and expelling him from the Inquisition. However, the old Inquisitor, who had been fighting the Tyranids for 250 years, was not ready to give up just like that. Joining forces with the remaining Death Watch members loyal to him, Fidus commenced a new operation against the Hive Fleet Leviathan. Waiting for another space wanderer infected with Tyranids to appear in reality, Kripman ordered the Space Marines to infiltrate it and capture live Djinn Stealers and other bioforms found there in stasis. Using the Djinn Stealers, the Inquisitor provoked a Tyranid invasion into the Octavius system, which was under Orc control at that time. The Inquisitor's plan worked, as Leviathan diverted from its initial course towards Terra and began the consumption of the Octavius system. However, Kripman's plan had a significant flaw. Regardless of who emerged victorious, the Imperium would have to face either Tyranids with newly acquired strong genes or Orcs hardened by endless war. Either way, while the Imperium gained precious time to strengthen its defences, Kripman's plan might ultimately lead to a terrible disaster. The disgraced Inquisitor was last seen at the Deathwatch fortress Holtmote, where he requested an audience with Watch Commander Vilnus to share his theories about the mysterious Hive Fleet Tiamat. Another controversial member of the Ordo Xenos is High Inquisitor Bronislaw Chivak. His birthplace and upbringing are unknown, but records exist that he spent his early years in the Schola Progenium. Since Chivak did not possess any exceptional combat skills or physical strength, but rather had a heightened survival instinct, a sharp mind, and a natural curiosity, he was destined to join the Inquisition. Bronislaw served for quite some time under the command of Inquisitor Furno, and ultimately earned the title of High Inquisitor. After a while, Chivak became the Grand Master of the Ordo Xenos of the Conclave Moabian, despite his Terran views, which many of his colleagues considered radical. However, the Inquisitor paid no mind to the opinions of the other members of the Ordo Xenos, believing that the threat surrounding the Imperium required the direct intervention of the Emperor of Mankind. Being well acquainted with the technologies of the Eldari, which he learned more about during his mission on Iyanden, Chivak became obsessed with the idea of using them to recreate the body of the Emperor. More rational Inquisitors, upon learning of Bronislaw's intentions, deemed him greatly mistaken and believed he needed to be guided back to the true path, while fervent Puritans threatened Chivak and demanded he cease his studies of alien technologies. Nevertheless, the Inquisitor did not abandon his research. At the end of the 41st millennium, he discovered the Eldari craft world, Euthuriel, buried on the planet Darkturus, and decided to explore it. Chivak hoped to find within it the shrine of Kayla Mensha Kine, and, by studying it, to glean more information for his plan to resurrect the Emperor. Unknown to Chivak, the Inquisition's conclave, whose patience had reached a critical point, decided to stop the radical Inquisitor. The Grand Master of the Conclave, Ephisto Specht, ordered the Deathwatch Marines accompanying Chivak to take the Inquisitor into custody and then bomb the Xenos ship from orbit. Bronislaw did not resist, but the situation did not end without bloodshed. Harlequins appearing out of nowhere killed the members of the Deathwatch and then presented Chivak with an offer from the Black Council he could not refuse. They offered him to travel through the webway to the Black Library to study the accumulated knowledge about chaos and assist the Eldari in stopping Ahriman. Despite the objections of his companions, the 400-years-old Bronislaw Chivak accepted the invitation and followed the Harlequins through the labyrinth of the webway to the Black Library. But before doing so, his interrogator Ramus Cluti injected the Inquisitor with a meme virus to better assimilate any information he could read. Upon arriving at the mysterious artificial world, Chivak spent all his free time in the Wraith Tower, studying the data collected about chaos. After several years, the Inquisitor noticed that his body had rejuvenated, and he no longer needed the cryo-suit that had been sustaining his frail body's life all this time. Sometime later, the rejuvenated Chivak returned to the Imperium. His return became a significant political event. He became a celebrity, with radical Inquisitors seeing him as a savior defender, while the Puritans, though they hated him, still craved the knowledge he had obtained. The Conclave reinstated Chivak to his position and allowed him to assemble a new retinue, so that he could continue his service to the Imperium. The Conclave also tasked Clute, who had become a full-fledged Inquisitor, with protecting Bronislaw due to the knowledge he had acquired. However, Chivac's return to the Imperium was to be short-lived. At the outset of the 13th Black Crusade, the Inquisitor was captured by the Thousand Sons and spent several years on the personal flagship of Ahriman. The sorcerer wanted to learn everything from Chivac about the Black Library, especially the runic activation codes for the portal to the webway, which would lead directly to the mysterious artificial world ship. Ahriman's apprentice, Korban Zarkos, under the sorcerer's orders, began to torture Chivac, testing every possible technique on him. Under the most terrible tortures, the Inquisitor revealed all his most shameful secrets, as well as many secrets of the Inquisition, and even spoke of everything he had read in the Black Library. However, the Inquisitor revealed nothing of how to access the Black Library, despite Zarkos' efforts. Somehow, the library psychically protected the information about itself, not allowing the path to the artificial world to be disclosed. Finally, the traitors brought Chivac's old love, who had been canonized as a living saint, and began to torture her. As her wounds healed quickly, the servants of chaos could torture her over and over again. The love and suffering of the Inquisitor finally broke the psychic defense of the library, and Ahriman was able to penetrate the mind of Bronislaw, forcing him to give up the necessary combination. The Thousand Sons would have continued to torture Chivac, if not for the Harlequins appearing out of nowhere, who, after a brief skirmish, were able to free the tortured Inquisitor from Ahriman's grasp. They took Chivac back to the Black Library, but this time not as a guest, but as a prisoner. There he was again placed in the Wraith Tower, but now in a small cell, where he continued to study the ways to combat chaos. Thanks to medical intervention and the restorative properties of Wraithbone, the Inquisitor quickly recovered from the tortures of the Thousand Sons and was rejuvenated. Chivac's captivity caused concern for the Black Council, and he soon became the subject of another of its meetings. Many of its members believed that Bronislaw should be imprisoned forever, so that his knowledge would never jeopardize the Eldari again. However, the seer Yggdrasil, whom Chivac had met in his youth, disagreed. He believed that the Inquisitor could still be useful to the Eldari, so he ordered his daughter Adara Kay to help Chivac escape, while all of the Eldari's attention was focused on the meeting of the Black Council. She handed him a strange imperial tome with a polished gold cover on which its title was inscribed in High Gothic, the Atlas Infernal. This tome constituted a living map of the webway, crafted before the Horus Heresy by unknown hands. Yet, given its psychic null field, its pages were seemingly made from the flesh of a Sister of Silence. Utilizing the Atlas, Chivac managed to escape from the Black Library, eluding the pursuing Harlequins as he wandered the webway, all the while pondering on his vengeance against Ahriman. Eventually, Chivac reunited with his old mentor, Clute, and embarked on a self-proclaimed crusade against Ahriman. Despite this, he became a prize sought after by nearly all forces within the galaxy, from the Imperium and the Eldari to the Agents of Chaos. The dangerous, unpredictable, and eccentric Bronislaw Chivac became a worthy adversary for all enemies of the Emperor of Mankind, who could no longer be underestimated. And another, who certainly could not be underestimated, was the Lord Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus, the Pyrophant Judge of Salem Proctor, Fyodor Karamazov. Amongst the multitude of Inquisitors, it would be hard to find another as relentless, uncompromising, and merciless a servant of the Emperor. Throughout his nearly 2 centuries-long career, Karamazov scythed his way from one end of the galaxy to the other, from Salem Proctor to the Ultima Macaria, from Bacca to Supramundi, known as a dark legend, a ruthless zealot of the law, stopping at nothing to obliterate any manifestations of corruption and heresy. Karamazov's actions were primarily driven by his unwavering belief that humanity is living according to a plan set into motion by the God Emperor himself many millennia ago. The life's work of the Inquisitor was to ensure that no one, be they human or Xenos, Inquisitor or demon, interfered with this divine plan. For most Inquisitors, this would be an impossible task, as many would lack the character or strength, but Karamazov's unshakable confidence in his abilities, as well as in the Emperor's design, meant he never doubted his actions. Unlike other Inquisitors who prefer to act in secrecy, revealing themselves only in extreme necessity, Karamazov always acted openly, whether on crusade or presiding over a trial of heretic. A devout Amalathian, Karamazov is a stern judge and tolerates no claims of innocence. He once boasted of having sent more witches and heretics to their deaths than Lord Solar Macarius. Karamazov steadily rose through the ranks of the Ordo Hereticus over decades, surrounding himself with the most fervent Puritans within the Inquisition. All his actions were celebrated for their strict adherence to the imperial creed. And although some inquisitors criticized his inflexibility, asserting he sent thousands of innocents to their deaths, the Lord Inquisitor only responded with the famous dictum, "Innocence proves nothing, and merely demonstrates foolish recklessness." Mercy, pardon, or any form of sentence mitigation are concepts wholly alien at the court of Karamazov, where even genuine innocence affords no hope for a verdict fair in the accused's eyes. The Lord Inquisitor brooks no tolerance for those foolish enough to appear guilty when they are in fact unrelated to the crimes they are accused of. Such fools, in Karamazov's opinion, are guilty of the egregious waste of his precious time, and will be unhesitatingly sent to the purging pyre alongside murderers, traitors, and heretics. The merciless Inquisitor conducted numerous operations against heretics and was ultimately following the Abrexan purges in the year 930 of the 41st millennium, elevated to the rank of Lord Inquisitor. Thereafter, he was gifted a mighty throne of judgment, which became a symbol of his authority and prestige. Despite Karamazov's reputation as a ruthless and relentless witch hunter being well known throughout the Segmentum Solar, he only cemented it further when, in the year 945 of the 41st millennium, he quelled a rebellion on the world of Salem Proctor. This world had betrayed the emperor, its governor, a renegade ecclesiarch drunk on power, began persecuting all who dared to question him. Learning of this, the Lord Inquisitor assembled a fleet and called upon 2 orders of the Adepta Sororitas to overthrow the cardinal, but upon arrival found that the world had already risen in rebellion against its treacherous ruler. A certain young preacher named Icarael led this uprising, and with the support of the Inquisition's forces defeated the cardinal's troops and exiled him from the burning ruins of his own cathedral. Those who fought alongside Icarael could not help but be moved by his eloquence, his devotion to the emperor, and his humility. For some, his feat in uniting the planet was proof that the preacher was guided by divine instructions and that the emperor's light flowed through his veins. Soon the Terran Inquisitors heard of this young man, thinking he might become a vessel for the emperor's spirit, and made their way to Salem Proctor. However, Lord Inquisitor Fyodor Karamazov, marching over the charred bones of heretics on his throne of judgment, harboured entirely different thoughts. Karamazov arrested Icarael and took him to the Inquisition's fortress of Severian, where he placed him in the Chamber of True Repentance. For 6 months, Karamazov subjected the preacher to all manner of tortures and presented hundreds of theological arguments for his wrongdoing, ignoring repeated demands from other inquisitors and ecclesiarchy members wishing to see Icarael. Ecclesiarch Decius XXIII appealed to the Grand Masters of the Inquisition for the preacher's release, and the Terran Inquisitors gathered local forces prepared to lay siege to Severian should Karamazov deny them access to Icarael. But it was already too late. The merciless Lord Inquisitor declared him a false prophet and sentenced him to death. The charred remains were delivered to the ecclesiarchy for burial, and Karamazov returned to his duties. Later on, Salem Proctor, worship of chaos was noted, peculiarly only among those who followed the teachings of Icarael. Karamazov was publicly rehabilitated, but after that incident his mere mention evokes hatred in the priests of the ecclesiarchy and the inquisitors of Terrans. Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus Tyrus, the most fervent adherent of the monodominant philosophy, whose bloody purges led to the death of thousands of heretics. Suspicious of all psychers, even those officially recognized by the Imperium, Tyrus swore that he would track down and exterminate all witches, mutants, and heretics in the galaxy, including Xenos psychers. And if, along the way, he has to kill all who seek to protect these abhorrent beings, then so be it. Tyrus is also one of the few searchings for heretics and traitors within the ranks of the Inquisition. Perhaps the life of the Inquisitor would have turned out differently if Tyrus had not become an orphan at 6 years old, due to a demonic invasion that occurred on his homeworld, Laressa. Cunningly acting through a teenage girl who could heal people with the laying of hands, the demon Prince Koloth the Excoriator spread a mutation plague across the planet. This weakened the fabric of reality so much that the demon managed to break through from the immaterium and inhabit the weakened mind of the girl. In his new guise, the demon destroyed Tyrus's village and began offering its inhabitants as sacrifices. The future Inquisitor was dragged from his home to the main square, after which, for several hours, the demon prince tortured Tyrus, gouging out his eye and cutting off his ear, so he could hear his own screams and see his flesh torn apart. When the smirking girl told him of the further tortures she would subject him to, Tyrus resigned to his fate and prepared for death. Only the timely intervention of the witch hunter Corvonis, who tracked down the demon using the Emperor's tarot, saved Tyrus's life. Clad in massive armor of exquisite craftsmanship, decorated with intricate carvings, the witch hunter suddenly appeared surrounded by the 4 angels of destruction in silver power armor. The demon ceased his gruesome work and turned to Corvonis, hissing in outrage upon seeing the old witch hunter. Through the red haze, Tyrus saw the mighty figure of Corvonis and his companions, battling the demon. 3 angels of death were struck down by spears of demonic fire before the witch hunter swung his blessed sword and decapitated the demon. Whirlwinds of screaming energy howled around the combatants as the demon was sent back to the warp from whence he came. Weakened, Tyrus watched as one of the Astartes doused the girl's corpse with streams of the sacred flame. Tyrus, nearly blinded by blood loss, staggered and approached the burning body and, staring into the flames, began to curse the demon until an armoured gauntlet rested on his shoulder. The boy looked into the stern face of Corvonis and realized that now only one path lay open to him. Tyrus became an apprentice to Corvonis and journeyed with him aboard the cruiser from which the Inquisitor teleported into battle, accompanied by the Grey Knights. Finding his place in the Inquisitor's retinue, Tyrus absorbed new knowledge and technology with a fervour only a man truly devoted to his cause could muster. He was bestowed with cybernetic implants to replace lost organs and began studying the path of the witch hunter, learning the tools and methods at their disposal. Corvonis was astounded. Never before had he encountered an acolyte who so swiftly mastered the rites of abhorrence, whose piety and dedication to the cause matched his own. After several years of intensive training, Tyrus matured, and his hatred for demons and those who worship these beings grew stronger each day. He became an exceptional fighter, mastering all the skills and rites necessary to vanquish demons. His faith, strength, and devotion to the immortal god Emperor were so high that a single word from him could stop a demonic being's hand and cause it to tremble at the young acolyte's fiery zeal. Many lowly and vile creatures were destroyed by Tyrus and his teacher, until a fateful incident claimed the life of the venerable witch hunter. The Emperor's tarot led Corvonis and his apprentice to the palaces of Epsilon Regalis. Despite the Regalis royal family's claims of innocence, the old Inquisitor was resolute and declared that all would undergo the trial of the Holy Seal. Into the palm of each royal family member, Corvonis placed a wax tablet while he himself heated his inquisitorial insignia over sacred fire. Corvonis explained to all present that when the seal heated from the fire, he would press it into the wax on each palm, and those whose flesh was scorched would know the Inquisition's full wrath, while those whose skin remained unblemished would be spared. When the Inquisitor placed the insignia into the first extended hand, the king's daughter's features contorted, and her face took on a sneering, demonic grimace familiar to Corvonis and his apprentice. Before them stood the demon prince Koloth, the excoriator, once again. In a moment the demon freed himself and inflicted a mortal wound on the old Inquisitor, and before his body fell to the marble floor, the rest of the royal family threw off their masks and transformed into horrific warp spawn. Tyrus instantaneously grabbed his teacher's sword and with righteous fury and terrifying wrath in his eyes began slaughtering the demons. The acolyte's heart burned with a desire for vengeance, and despite his youth, he quickly dispatched the lesser demons, left alone with Koloth in the blood-soaked room. The two old enemies clashed in a duel, delivering blows so powerful that none other could have blocked them. With one of his moves, the demon nearly struck down Tyrus, and only the acolyte's exceptional willpower allowed him to stay on his feet and continue the fight. Shouting devout prayers, Tyrus struck the demon in the chest with the blade of Corvonis, and extracting its still-beating heart, crushed it in his armoured fist. Dying, the demon merely smiled and, vomiting curses and blasphemous vows, promised the witch hunter that they would meet again. Saddened by the death of his mentor, but understanding that the corruption of the royal family could spread among the planet's population, Tyrus began the bloody purges of the surrounding cities. Sending tens of thousands of people to the pyre, he was able to ensure the safety of the remaining citizens of Epsilon Regalis. The Lord's Inquisitors whom Corvonis had served made Tyrus a full-fledged Inquisitor, and even allowed him to restore his mentor's armour so that he could continue his war. Soon, he became a celebrity, and his purges became well known throughout the galaxy. A fervent monodominant, Tyrus, in his quest to eradicate heresy, could fan the flames of zeal and faith in the people of any planet he purifies, making unity under his leadership possible among individuals from different strata. In one way or another, Inquisitor Tyrus continues to pursue the unfaithful across the galaxy, bringing the light of the Emperor to those who need it most, and eradicating those who would wish it extinguished. Tyrus's conviction in his methods, first employed tens of thousands of years ago on Terra, instills in some Inquisitors the confidence that the fervent witch-hunter enacts the will of the Emperor himself. Lord Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus, Torquemada Coteaz, known also as the High Protector of the Formosa sector, is one of the most powerful Inquisitors in the galaxy, whose hatred for demons knows no bounds. Coteaz seems to have been obsessed with one idea his entire life: the destruction of demons wherever they may appear. Unlike many of his colleagues from the Ordo Malleus, Torquemada refuses even to consider the use of warp forces in his battle against them. Similar to Inquisitor Tyrus, he often pursues Inquisitors who, in his opinion, are not sufficiently pure. Even his own mentor was personally executed by Coteaz for studying and using forbidden arts. This occurred during one of the Inquisition's conclaves on the planet of the Gate, when his former mentor, Lord Inquisitor Leridian, presented to the conclave a warp-tainted crystal which he believed could be useful in locating other such chaos-infested items. Leridian implored the other Inquisitors to study the artifact, but as soon as he finished his speech, Coteaz stood up from his seat and struck the crystal with his hammer, completely destroying it. He accused his teacher of heresy and sorcery. The conclave instantly reacted and criticized Coteaz for his disrespect for the meeting's protocol. But the unflappable Inquisitor merely pulled out a small hourglass and declared that he would present all evidence before the sand ran out. Coteaz spoke of several instances where Leridian employed demon hosts or used the warp's magic to combat the enemy. At the conclusion of his speech, the Inquisitor executed his mentor on the spot, eliciting shock and respect among all those present. The conclave immediately elevated Torquemada Coteaz to the rank of Lord Inquisitor, after which he took up the mantle of Protector of the Formosa sector, managing through intimidation, blackmail, and threats to weave it into his network of numerous spies. Coteaz is one of the few who does not rely on the Imperial forces, preferring to keep a personal army of fanatical cutthroats at hand. As the High Protector, Coteaz has thousands of followers from various strata of the Imperial society in the Formosa sector. From his fortress on Nemesis Tessera, Torquemada Coteaz watches over his network, awaiting reports of threats. It is not known how many of the Formosa sector's planetary defense forces are as much Coteaz's sworn men as they are those of their commanders, or how many hive gangs act under Coteaz's control, given license to pursue their own petty activities so long as they act as his eyes. People disappear easily in Formosa, and its citizens know better than to inquire. At first, it might seem that Coteaz's stranglehold is merely a manifestation of his insatiable thirst for power, but in reality, the Inquisitor has never sought to rule and rarely interferes with the affairs of planetary governors. His network exists with a sole purpose: to alert the Inquisitor of any threat looming over the Formosa sector. Ultimately, in a sector where 2 out of 3 randomly chosen citizens are informants for Coteaz, it becomes very difficult for heretics to conduct their subversive activities. Thus, the dominion of Torquemada thrives while the rest of the Imperium begins to be increasingly undermined by the internal enemy. However, few could have achieved the same success since Coteaz is fully engrossed in the path he follows. He rarely sleeps and spends all his free time studying reports brought by his faithful Cyber Eagle, or personally leading armies against demons, heretics or Xenos foolish enough to invade his domain. Lately, the influence of Coteaz has spread to worlds bordering the Formosa sector, and more planets come under his protection. Despite this, the Inquisitor has often contemplated that his work might remain unfinished, as he has yet to find a successor whose shoulders could bear such a heavy burden. Therefore, Coteaz began to search for lost knowledge of cloning and life extension, as well as to study the technologies of Xenos that could help him avoid aging. However, there is one path the Inquisitor would never take. Coteaz is well aware that the gift he seeks might be obtained from demons should he summon them and bind them through the appropriate rituals. A minor part of the Inquisitor's consciousness not only resigned itself to such a fate, but seemingly began to crave it, so that Torquemada could continue his righteous war. This temptation grows stronger with each passing day, yet Kotias steadfastly resists it for now. Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex, an old and esteemed member of the Ordo Malleus, as well as a true hero of the Imperium of Man. He has devoted his entire life to fighting the servants of chaos in all their countless manifestations, yet reserves a special hatred for all who were once spawned by the warp. Hector is one of the few to hold the title Auditorii Imperator, which signifies that he was granted a personal audience with the Emperor of Mankind. This is the highest privilege even such a powerful person can receive, as not even all the High Lords of Terror are granted such an honor. However, Hector Rex began his service to the Emperor as a sanctioned psyker in the Scholastia Psychana. Even without training, his power was so great that he easily surpassed the most trained psychers who were soon to be dispatched to the Imperial Guard. When his mentors saw his potential, they conducted a series of genetic enhancements, akin to the genetic modifications of the Astartes, and to their amazement, all went well. Once all the procedures were completed, Hector had grown to 2.4 meters tall, and his muscles were like bundles of steel cables. After observing Rex for some time, the leadership of the Scholastia Psychana transferred him to the Inquisition, where he became an acolyte of Inquisitor Thor Malkin. During his service, Rex quickly advanced in the ranks of Ordo Malleus and became a member of the Inner Circle, one of those initiated into the secrets and truths of the nature of demons and methods of combating them. Later, Hector Rex became the Proctor General of the Scarus Conclave, which oversaw all Inquisition operations in the Scarus sector. With such vast powers, the Lord Inquisitor has repeatedly led Imperial armies and called upon the Grey Knights numerous times to combat demonic threats. A fierce Puritan, Hector Rex tolerates no compromises when it comes to dealing with demon accomplices. He personally tracked down and captured the radical Inquisitor Galasek, and his acolytes continue to search for lost followers of the renegade throughout the Segmentum Obscurus. One of the most famous operations of Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex is considered to be the closing of a warp portal on the world of Hellenus III. There, Rex commanded a strike team of Grey Knights and personally defeated a greater demon of Khorne, sending it back into the warp. For this, he was awarded the ancient Nemesis Force weapon Arias, forged at the dawn of the Empire and blessed by the hand of the Emperor himself. Such valuable relics are extracted from their stasis chambers only to be awarded to the greatest heroes of the Ordo Malleus. Like any powerful Inquisitor, Hector Rex is surrounded by hundreds of acolytes, familiars and servants who manage his daily affairs, though most of them also follow him into battle. When an Inquisitor personally leads an army into battle, he is accompanied by exorcists, ecclesiarchy priests, trained to banish demons through the power of their faith, as well as acolytes, veterans of the Imperial Guard, Inquisition stormtroopers, and numerous sages and mystics. Alongside his formidable personal retinue, Hector Rex has access to operatives from the Officio Assassinorum and drop troops from the chapter of the Grey Knights, who are the military wing of the Ordo Malleus. The last widely known operation of Lord Inquisitor Hector Rex was the assault on a heretic fortress during the siege of Vrax. It was Rex who, using the Emperor's tarot, predicted that a mere uprising could lead to the planet could potentially fall and become a demon world. To prevent such an outcome, he requested from the Scarus Conclave to have the entire 88th Regiment of the Death Corps of Krieg included in his retinue, so that he might take control over the entire operation on Vrax, which he eventually did, despite protests from the Ordo Hereticus, whose members believed that the uprising fell under their jurisdiction. Having gained control over the Imperial forces on the planet and calling upon the Grey Knights for assistance, Hector Rex went to Vrax, where in the heat of battle he faced a demon of Khorne named Anagrath the Unbound. Surrounded by holy light, Hector fought like one possessed, eventually gaining the upper hand. The Lord Inquisitor uttered the true name of the demon, which flung Anagrath aside as if he were kicked by the Warhound-class Titan. Gathering all his psychic might, Hector Rex began to send white lightning at the demon until it collapsed to the ground. As the fallen began to call out to his patron deity, the Inquisitor plunged his sword deep into the demon's chest. A powerful halo of light enveloped Hector Rex as he, gathering his remaining strength, channeled it through his sword into the black heart of the demon. Anagrath cried out in despair, for he knew he was defeated, cut off from the life-sustaining energy of the warp, and within a minute dissipated from reality, returning to the warp. Despite Vrax being saved, Hector Rex placed the planet under the quarantine of the Ordo Malleus, ordering that Imperial fleet patrols shoot down any ship that appears in the system. Suddenly, Corvin's contemplations were interrupted by two people who appeared suddenly before his table. One was clad in a black robe with a deep hood that hid his face, while the other wore heavy carapace armor of an Inquisition stormtrooper, black over a crimson uniform. Ledberg frowned in displeasure, but still gestured for them to sit. Immediately, a waitress rushed to the Inquisitor's table and, with fluttering eyelashes, hastily took the newcomer's orders, then vanished just as quickly under the gaze of the stormtrooper. Corvin took a sip of wine and looked questioningly at his subordinates. "We apologize, Inquisitor Ledberg, but the news is urgent and we thought you might want to hear it sooner rather than later," said the man in the robe. "Yes, we know how much you dislike surprises," added the stormtrooper. The acolyte cast a sideways glance at his companion and continued, "Yes, so credible rumors have reached us." The acolyte fell silent, and looking around whispered, "That Lord Karamazov will propose to the Conclave to elevate you to the rank of Lord Inquisitor. That is why we decided to disturb your peace." The acolyte wanted to say something more, but then a waitress appeared carrying the order, and he fell silent. However, Corvin was no longer interested in what his subordinate was about to relay. The news of his elevation to Lord Inquisitor had already occupied all his thoughts.